2. Virtue. However, even when this path of purification is shown in this way under the headings of virtue, concentration and understanding, each comprising various special qualities, it is still only shown extremely briefly. And so, since that is insufficient to help all there is in order to show it in detail, the following set of questions dealing, in the first place, with virtue. What is virtue? In what sense is it virtue? What are its characteristics, function, manifestation, and proximate cause? What are the benefits of virtue? How many kinds of virtue are there? What is the defiling of it? What is the cleansing of it? Here are the answers. What is virtue? It is the states beginning with volition present in one who abstains from killing living beings, etc., or in one who fulfills the practice of the duties. For this is said in the Patisambhida. What is virtue? There is virtue as volition, virtue as consciousness concomitant, virtue as restraint, virtue as non-transgression. Herein, virtue as volition is the volition present in one who abstains from killing living beings, etc., or in one who fulfills the practice of the duties. Virtue as consciousness concomitant is the abstinence in one who abstains from killing living things, and so on. Furthermore, virtue as volition is the 7th volitions that accompany the first 7 of the 10 courses of action, kama, in one who abandons the killing of living things, and so on. Virtue as consciousness concomitant is the 3 remaining states consisting of non-covetousness, non-ill will, and right view, stated in the way beginning, abandoning covetousness, he dwells with mind free from covetousness. Virtue as restraint should be understood here as restraint in the 5 ways. Restraint by the rules of the community, patimokkha, restraint by mindfulness, restraint by knowledge, restraint by practice, and restraint by energy. Herein, restraint by the patimokkha is this: he is furnished, fully furnished, with this patimokkha restraint. Restraint by mindfulness is this: he guards the eye faculty, enters upon restraint of the eye faculty. Restraint by knowledge is this: he currents in the world that flow, ajitta, said the Blessed One, are stemmed by means of mindfulness. Restraint of currents I proclaim. By understanding they are damned. And use of requisites is here combined with this. But what is called restraint by patience? It is that given in the way beginning, he is one who bears cold and heat. And what is called restraint by energy? Is that given in the way beginning, he does not endure a thought of sense desires when it arises. Purification of livelihood is here combined with this. So this 5-fold restraint and the abstinence in clansmen who dread evil from any chance of transgression met with should be understood to be virtue as restraint. Virtue as non-transgression is the non-transgression by body or speech of precepts of virtue that have been undertaken. This is This, in the first place, is the answer to the question, what is virtue? Now as to the rest. In what sense is it virtue? It is virtue sila in the sense of composing silana. What is this composing? It is either a coordinating samadhana, meaning non-inconsistency of bodily action, etc., due to virtuousness, or it is an upholding upadharana, meaning a state of basis adhara, owing to its serving as foundation for profitable states. For those who understand etymology, admit only these two meanings. Others, however, comment on the meaning here in the way beginning. The meaning of virtue, sila, is the meaning of head, siras. The meaning of virtue is the meaning of cool, sitala. Now, what are its characteristic, function, manifestation, and proximate cause? Here, the characteristic of it is composing, even when analysed in various ways, as visibility is of visible data, even when analysed in various ways. Just as visibleness is the characteristic of the visible data, base, even when analysed into the various categories of blue, yellow, etc., because even when analysed into these categories it does not exceed visibleness, so also this same composing described above as the coordinating of bodily action, etc., and as the foundation of profitable states, is the characteristic of virtue even when analysed into the various categories of volition, etc. Because even when analysed into these categories it does not exceed the state of coordination and foundation. While such is its characteristic, its function has a double sense: action to stop misconduct, then achievement as the quality of blamelessness in virtuous men. So what is called virtue should be understood to have the function, nature of stopping misconduct, and its function, nature in the sense of action, and a blameless function, nature as its function, nature in the sense of achievement. For under these headings of characteristic, etc., it is action, or it is achievement, sampati, that is called function, nature. Now virtue, so say those who know, itself as purity will show, and for its proximate cause they tell, the pair, conscience and shame as well. This virtue is manifested as the kinds of purity stated thus: bodily purity, verbal purity, mental purity. It is manifested, comes to be apprehended as a pure state. But conscience and shame are said by those who know to be its proximate cause. Its near reason is the meaning. For when conscience and shame are in existence, virtue arises and persists. And when they are not, it neither arises nor persists. This is how virtue's characteristic, function, manifestation, and proximate cause should be understood. What are the benefits of virtue? Its benefits are the acquisition of the several special qualities, beginning with non-remorse. For this is said, Ananda, profitable habits have non-remorse as their aim and non-remorse as their benefit. Also it is said further, Householder, there are these 5 benefits for the virtuous in the perfecting of virtue. What 5? Here, householder, one who is virtuous, possessed of virtue, comes into large fortune as a consequence of diligence. This is the first benefit for the virtuous in the perfecting of virtue. Again, of one who is virtuous, possessed of virtue, a fair name is spread abroad. This is the second benefit for the virtuous in the perfecting of virtue. Again, whenever one who is virtuous, possessed of virtue, enters an assembly, whether of Khatiyas, warrior nobles, or Brahmins, or householders, or ascetics, he does so without fear or hesitation. This is the third benefit for the virtuous in the perfecting of virtue. Again, one who is virtuous, possessed of virtue, dies unconfused. This is the fourth benefit for the virtuous in the perfecting of virtue. Again, one who is virtuous, possessed of virtue, on the breakup of the body after death, reappears in a happy destiny. In the heavenly world, this is the fifth benefit for the virtuous in the perfecting of virtue. There are also the many benefits of virtue, beginning with being dear and loved, and ending with destruction of cankers, described in the passage beginning, If a bhikkhu should wish, may I be dear to my fellows in the life of purity, and loved by them, held in respect and honoured by them, let him perfect the virtues. This is how virtue has its benefits, the several special qualities, beginning with non-remorse. Furthermore, dare anyone a limit place on benefits that virtue beings, without which virtue clansmen find no footing in the dispensation. No Ganges and no Yamuna, no Sarabu, Sarasati, or flowing Achiravati, or noble river of Mahi, is able to wash out the stain in things that breathe here in the world. For only virtue's water can wash out the stain in living things. No breezes can come, no breeze that comes bringing rain, no balm of yellow sandalwood, no necklaces beside, or gems, or soft effluence of moonbeams can here avail to calm and soothe men's fever in this world. Whereas this noble, this supremely cool, well-guarded virtue quells the flame. Where is there to be found the scent that can with virtue's scent compare, and that is borne against the wind as easily as with it? Where can such another stair be found that climbs as virtue does to heaven, or yet another door that gives unto the city of Nibbana? Shine as they may, there are no kings adorned with jewelry and pearls that shine as does a man restrained, adorned with virtue's ornament. Virtue entirely does away with dread of self-blame and the like. Their virtue to the virtuous gives gladness always by its fame. From this brief sketch it may be known how virtue brings reward, and how this root of all good qualities robs of its power every fault. Now here is the answer to the question, how many kinds of virtue are there? 1. Firstly, all of this virtue, is of one kind by reason of its own characteristic of composing. 2. It is of two kinds, as keeping and avoiding. 3. Likewise, as that of good behaviour, and that of the beginning of the life of purity. 4. As abstinence and non-abstinence. 5. As dependent and independent. 6. As temporary and lifelong. 7. As limited and unlimited. 8. As mundane and supramundane. 9. It is of three kinds, as inferior, medium, and superior. 10. Likewise, as giving precedence to self, giving precedence to the world, and giving precedence to the Dhamma, law. 11. As adhered to, not adhered to, and tranquilized. 12. As purified, unpurified, and dubious. 13. As that of the trainer, that of the non-trainer, and that of the neither trainer nor non-trainer. 14. It is of four kinds, as partaking of diminution, of stagnation, of distinction, of penetration. 15. Likewise, as that of bhikkhus, of bhikkhunis, of the not fully admitted, of the laity. 16. As natural, customary, necessary, due to previous causes. 17. As virtue of patimokkha restraint of sense faculties, of purification of the livelihood, and that concerning requisites. 18. It is of five kinds, as virtue consisting in limited purification, etc. For this is said in the Patisambhida, 5 kinds of virtue: virtue consisting in limited purification, virtue consisting in unlimited purification, virtue consisting in fulfilled purification, virtue consisting in unadhered to purification, virtue consisting in tranquilized purification. And 19. Likewise, as abandoning, refraining, volition, restraint, and non-transgression. Herein, in the section dealing with that of one kind, the meaning should be understood as already stated. In the section dealing with that of two kinds, fulfilling a training precept announced by the Blessed One, thus: this should be done, is keeping, not doing what is prohibited by him. Thus, this should not be done is avoiding. Herein the word meaning is this: they keep, charanti, within that. They proceed as people who fulfill the virtues. Thus it is keeping, charita. They preserve, they protect, avoidance. Thus it is avoiding. Herein keeping is accomplished by faith and energy, avoiding by faith and mindfulness. This is how it is of two kinds, as keeping and avoiding. In the second jihad, good behaviour is the best kind of behaviour. Good behaviour itself is that of good behaviour, or what is announced for the sake of good behaviour is that of good behaviour. This is a term for virtue other than that which has livelihood as eighth. It is the initial stage of the life of purity consisting in the path. Thus it is that of the beginning of the life of purity. This is a term for the virtue that has livelihood as eighth. It is the initial stage of the path because it has actually to be purified in the prior stage too. Hence it is said, but his bodily action, his verbal action, and his livelihood have already been purified earlier. or the training precepts called lesser and minor, are that of good behaviour, the rest are that of the beginning of the life of purity. Or what is included in the double code, the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, patimokkha, is that of the beginning of the life of purity, and that included in the duties set out in the kandakas of the Vinaya is that of good behaviour. Through its perfection, that of the beginning of the life of purity comes to be perfected. Hence it is said also that this bhikkhu shall fulfill the state consisting in the beginning of the life of purity without having fulfilled the state consisting in good behaviour. That is not possible. So it is of two kinds, as that of good behaviour and that of the beginning of the life of purity. In the third jhad, virtue is abstinence, is simply abstination from killing living things, etc. The other kinds, consisting in volition, etc., are virtue as non-abstinence, so it is of two kinds, as abstinence and non-abstinence. In the fourth dyad, there are two kinds of dependence, dependence through craving and dependence through false views. Herein, that produced by one who wishes for a fortunate kind of becoming thus: through this virtuous conduct I shall become a great deity or some minor deity, is dependent through craving. That produced through such false view about purification, as purification is through virtuous conduct, is dependent through false view. But the supramundane and the mundane is that is the prerequisite for the aforesaid supramundane are independent. So it is of two kinds, as dependent and independent. In the fifth jhad, temporary virtue is that undertaken after deciding on a time limit. Lifelong virtue is that practiced in the same way, but undertaking it for as long as life lasts. So it is of two kinds, as temporary and lifelong.